Because I run a job board, I talk to applicants almost every day. And many of the people I meet make the same mistake. They have no clear job search goals. So they apply everywhere, every day, all day long. You might think it's smart to send lots of applications. After all, it's a numbers game, right? It's not. The more you narrow your search, the easier everything gets, and the happier you'll be in your next job. Stop chasing every lead. Instead, focus on what you really want. Now, figuring out your goals can be hard, but we have a MaxList resource that can help. Finding focus in your job search. Go to maxlist.org/focus. Our free step-by-step MaxList guide will help you create your own job search goals. Get your copy today. Visit maxlist.org/focus. Again, that's maxlist.org/focus. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of MaxList. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. You interview for a job, and you decide it's not the right position for you. How do you say no? Andy Hibel is here to talk about how to walk away from the wrong job offer. He's the Chief Operating Officer and the co-founder of Higher Ed Jobs. It's the established leader in the academic recruitment field. Andy also co-hosts the Higher Ed Jobs podcast, and he joins us from Chicago, Illinois. Well, let's jump right into it, Andy. We're going to walk through 3 scenarios about when and how to walk away from the wrong job offer. But before we do this, let's start with some general questions. Shouldn't it be clear before you apply whether or not a job is going to be a good fit or not?
You would hope that it would be. Unfortunately, submitting your application is the start of the process. Job posting ads don't always include all of the nuance of a position. And not only is it the substance of the position, but it's the process that you're going through as an applicant that may reveal some of the reasons that you don't necessarily see within the confines of the words of a job posting.
So it's not uncommon for people to send in an application and have that initial conversation and decide it's not a good fit. Is that true, Andy?
I think it's absolutely true. It's probably just about as common as looking for a house on a short-term rental site and looking at the pictures and then eventually experiencing the house and say, wow, these things don't quite match what I thought I was getting myself into.
So this is likely to happen in a search, but what's been your experience? Is it hard for candidates to drop out of a hiring process once they start?
I think if there's one thing that needs to infuse our conversation, Mac, is I don't want to in any way appear to be insensitive to one cold, hard fact. But there's simply sometimes where you can't walk away from a job, where you are in a position where you need to pursue anything and everything you can to have work to keep your life moving in the direction you need it to. So in many of these instances, I think we're talking about ideal situations or situations where you're making choices that you have the ability to make choices as opposed to choices that you have to make. With that, there are definitely times when you do need to walk away. And I think it's difficult sometimes because once you put your foot into the water, it's really hard to remove yourself because you want to learn more. You want to see maybe if you have some red flags, whether or not they'll resolve. I think that's just human nature. And if you're really committing yourself and to this process, you kind of want to run everyone out, if you will.
Say more about that difficulty about why people struggle with this. If they do have the privilege of a choice, why is it hard to walk away?
I think it's hard to walk away because the process in and of itself is challenging. It puts yourself and who you are to be tested. And the idea of just voluntarily removing yourself from an opportunity that is active just seems counterintuitive to the process. It's just not what we have generally done. And most people don't do it. But I think if we're looking at the flip side, I think there's things you can do to better understand A, what you're looking for, but B, the flip side of it is you have a finite amount of bandwidth to do this emotionally, time wise. You just can only spend that to the point where you have it. And the more time you're spending on positions that maybe you shouldn't be pursuing, the less time you have to start identifying ones you should be.
What about fear, Andy? Especially if you've been looking for a job for a while, how can someone overcome the fear of saying no to a job offer?
Well, let's first kind of use the nuance you just presented there, Mac, which is if you've been looking for a job for a while. I think if you've been looking for a job for a while and it's been a particularly difficult search, I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about today is best case scenario. And if you're in a position where you need to do something, I'm going to once again stress you just need to do it. Um, we can get to what happens if you get that job and that maybe it's not the right fit. But the idea that if you're in one of those situations, that those are different rules that apply. I think fear, going to the emotional side of a job search, fear is a very difficult emotion to deal with within a job search. Fear is going to motivate everything you do, but fear is also going to come out in your candidacy. If you're doing a job search for fear, and fear is what is the emotion that's leading it, that's going to absolutely come through in your process. It's hard to hide what you're feeling at the end of the day.
How do you overcome that fear, Andy?
I think you overcome that fear not by necessarily overcoming it. I think your fear is what kind of keeps you motivated and going, but you think you channel it towards positive things. What are you looking for first and foremost? Why are you making this change? And what you're looking for there is not to just react because you're in a job search and this looks like a job that kind of fits it, but does it actually fit the criteria that you're looking for to make that move? Because part of this is part of your career story. It's not just a job, but it's the story you're going to tell employers years down the line when they look at your resume and see this position. Well, why did you take that position? And if it fits in your story, there's a positive feel to what your career looks like. If you're just making choices out of fear from one position to the next because you needed a job, I think employers get a sense of that. And your resume and your candidacy is going to show that.
I want to walk through these three scenarios for when you might say no to the wrong job offer. Before we do that, let's talk about when you might walk away and how you do it. So you've applied, you recognize it's not the right position for you. When in that hiring process should you communicate that, Andy?
I think you can communicate it at any point where you realize that and you understand that your investment is not worth the return of getting this job. Now, I'd also say, and maybe this is kind of analogous to the quiet quitting, if you're in one of those scenarios where you just kind of have to roll with the inertia, you get the job, I would also say you don't have to stop looking at that point. You can keep looking at other positions that are out there and keep your search going. I mean, the idea that, yeah, you've landed a new job, and yes, you owe it to yourself first and foremost, but also to this organization that's hired you to put yourself into this position. But that doesn't mean that you have to leave the job search. There is no legal obligation. A lot of employers have a certain probationary period. You could put a probationary period on an employer too and keep your job search going. As far as other points during the process, hey, there is nothing wrong with it. I would just say probably the most important point is when you withdraw or you decline it, you're honest and open about the specific reasons. I don't feel supported like I'm going to be successful in it. At further learning about the position, it really did not meet the criteria of what I'm looking for in my next move. I think when you have objective standards of what you're looking for and the position doesn't meet it, it's a lot easier to be clear about why your candidacy is no longer viable from your your perspective.
How do you say no gracefully? What are your do's and don'ts that you recommend here, Andy?
I think, first of all, grace is a great word there, Mac. I think you have to do it with grace. You need to put yourself in the position of the employer who hears it. Make sure your feedback is honest. Make sure it's direct. It should not in any way be personality related. If there's some truth to the personality, I don't think that helps to say. I think you can talk more about culture or other things other than making it personal, but don't say, I can't work for this person. They're not somebody who I'd work well with from a personality perspective. Nobody wants to hear that. But to say, listen, it just appears like the culture of management here does not necessarily fit within a system that I think I would thrive in. I don't think you'd be getting your all out of me, and I don't think I'd be able to put my all into it. Like, I think that those things are there. I think understanding from your perspective why you need to do that, waiting for the offer until you say no. If you know earlier in the process, you're only taking bandwidth away from the employer and bandwidth, more importantly, away from yourself to get to a point that you will eventually say no if you get the offer. If you're thinking for a moment during the process that, well, if I get the offer, I don't know if I'm taking this, you really need to sit down and have a conversation with yourself about what it is you're looking for and why you have that reaction. And then I think that's going to give you the tools on how to be able to gracefully and professionally let that be known to the employer.
Well, let's take a break. Stay with us. When we come back, Andy Hibel will continue to share his advice on how to walk away from the wrong job offer. Have you promised yourself you would travel more this year? Well, I have the next promise you need to make. Learning a new language with Babbel. Thanks to Babbel, you don't have to be that tourist who talks to others through a translation app. With Babbel's help, I've kept my Spanish up. And that means the next time I visit Spain or Latin America, I can handle real-life conversations in restaurants, stores, and airports. You can too. Learn everything you need from vocabulary to culture while holding your own in conversation with anybody. Babbel's tips and tools are inspired by the real-life stuff you actually need when communicating. And because conversing is the key to understanding each other in a new language, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. With a focus on conversation, you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. This year, get talking with Babbel. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/dreamjob. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/dreamjob. Spelled BABBEL.com/dreamjob. Babbel.com/dreamjob. Rules and restrictions may apply. Every year, the number and scope of data breaches worldwide keeps rising. And the likelihood of your own data getting breached is constantly increasing. That's because there are hundreds of commercial databases with personal information. These data brokers collect your name, social security number, home address, and much, much more. And all of this is available for sale and could fall into the hands of criminals. Not only can this lead to your inbox filling up with annoying spam messages, you might also hear from scammers. Job seekers are a favorite target. Many applicants who use Mac's List tell me they've received job offers that seem too good to be true. And if you follow up, you're asked to share personal information that could be used to steal your identity, commit mail or wire fraud, or trick you into sending money. Here's the good news. You can ask the data brokers to delete your information, and Incogni can help. Incogni reaches out to data brokers for you, requests removal of your personal information, and deals with any objections. Use promo code DREAMJOB to get an exclusive 60% off Incogni's annual subscription plan. Go to incogni.com/dreamjob. We're back in the Mac's List studio. I'm talking with Andy Hibel. He's the Chief Operating Officer and the co-founder of Higher Ed Jobs. It's the established leader in the academic recruitment field. Andy also co-hosts the Higher Ed Jobs podcast, and he joins us from Chicago, Illinois. Well, Andy, before our break, we were talking about how to walk away from the wrong job offer. And we started out with questions about how people might find themselves in this situation and how steps they might take, especially in terms of timing about when and how to say no. And you've got three scenarios where you say this is likely to happen. Let's walk through each of them. And I know you touched on some of these points in the first segment, but the first of your three scenarios is you might find yourself in a situation where you can't walk away from a job offer. Tell us more about this and give us examples of what you have in mind.
I think, unfortunately, that this scenario is a pretty prevalent scenario, and it's one that absolutely occurs to everyone over a period of time. And maybe if you're out there and you're in a longer job search or a job search where you just need to take that job that comes along, know you're not alone. Know that just about everybody's been at that point at some point in their career. It's okay. Don't panic. Don't operate like we spoke before out of fear. Just understand that that's the situation you're in. And I think looking at that scenario, it's a really tough way to start a position where you're trying to, for yourself, put your best professional self forward, but at the same time, as we discussed before, probably keep that job search going, and maybe have some hope. Don't overcommit to hope, but have some hope that maybe some of those reservations about the position going into it resolve themselves, and it's actually much more palatable of a position than you thought it would be. And give it time to see if things might mend in a nice way. You might find out after a few months that actually this is not a bad place for you to be, and you're not seeing anything coming in that job search that you've kept open, and maybe you'll stick around there for a while.
What do you say to employers if you're still looking after you've been at a position for 3, 6, 9 months about why you're looking? And won't they worry that you might jump ship if you join their team as well?
I think that in some instances, I absolutely think that they would worry. In other instances, I think it might be a little bit different. I think in the instance of first what you say to employers, I think you're just direct. I've started this new position. I think you say, I've kept the search going for what was in progress at the point I accepted it, and I wanted to run things through. I think that that's a fair answer that a lot of employers will kind of understand why you're still there. I think the second point you need to understand is if you have a history of this is a harder thing to pull off. If you've gone from job to job to job with a shorter tenure at each one of those, employers are going to see that. Do I think that this is the one thing that's going to put it over the top? I don't necessarily think so in that instance if you have one of those resumes that has shorter tenures. So I'm not sure that that's going to be the major cause of them having that, but I do think that it will definitely make the red flags a little redder, but not crazy redder. If you have a history of established employment at a good number of places for longer tenures, I think a mulligan here and there, people understand, and I wouldn't worry about it the same way.
Your second scenario is you might say no to a position that doesn't match your goals. What kind of goals should you consider when thinking about saying no to the wrong job offer?
I think logistical and in your life and how you manage your life along with your professional career is probably at the top of that list. If you have responsibilities that at home that are going to be very, very difficult or put a major strain on you or your family to make this work out, I think that, and we're talking a lot of people have this, then you really need to think about it. I think that is the first area. I think the second area is it could be workplace issues, could be supervisor, could be culture, could be a lot of people hopping in and out. Maybe you don't even know who your supervisor would be. That would be the second issue. And the third issue would just be, how does it fit into your career story? This is not really what I want to be doing right now. I don't want to make the change just for this. I think from the career story and those issues, I think going into it, understanding why you're leaving your current position and what you're seeking differently. And maybe also of doing an honest evaluation of what you like about your current position will better help you determine what those criteria are.
It's striking, Andy, that you haven't mentioned money on your list of things to consider that might lead you to say no. You've talked about culture, commute time, personal responsibilities. Where might salary figure into your consideration?
I mean, that I think I have not mentioned it. I guess in that first set of topics for you and your family and the circumstances, assuming you're taking more responsibility, you're getting more money, I think money figures in there, but I think it's also a question of if you're just taking a position simply because you want more money, but doesn't fit the scenario, I don't know if that would be a time where a friend of mine came to me and said, you know what, I've been making X and I want to make 20% more than X. I would ask the question, why? Why do you need to do that? Tell me. And if there's legitimate reasons, obviously that's part of to do it. But simply making more money for the sake of making more money, for me, I think that is there needs to be other stuff other than just that, in my opinion. If there's reasons why you need to make more money, absolutely. But if this is just something that you feel on the scorecard you need a higher score for, I want to understand why.
Your third scenario, where you recommend passing on a position, is in cases where the employer doesn't provide the resources for success. What do you mean by resources for success, Andy?
We all are part of a team. Nobody operates within their position by themselves. You have to work with others and you have to work within the environment you're given. And being here in Chicago, I always like using the example of there's a number of famous people in Chicago, but I'm not sure there's any more famous than Michael Jordan. And there's a whole great story about how Michael Jordan was passed on by the Portland Trail Blazers and they drafted Sam Bowie out in Portland. And Michael then dropped to number 3 and went to the Bulls. And everybody says, what happens if Michael would have gone to the Portland Trailblazers at that point? There was a very famous Trailblazer that I'm sure you love, Mac, and that was Clyde Drexler. Michael may have played behind Clyde. That wasn't a scenario where Michael was going to thrive. He couldn't have an offense focused around him. You need, as a job seeker, to look at, is there a Clyde Drexler who's here who really kind of serves that role? Does the team have the budget to sign other people? Are they short-staffed? What's the goals of the organization and the trends of the organization? All of those things are so important. Success begets success. And if you want to be successful, you need to see an organization that gives you a pathway towards that. That I think that is something that is so essential in this process.
Well, it's been a terrific conversation, and thank you for reminding me of the Clyde Drexler days. Tell us, Andy, what's next for you?
Well, Higher Ed Jobs always has a lot going on, and we expect 2025 to once again be busy at colleges and universities. And as usual, we have a wonderful, wonderful set of customers that we get to serve, and we're just delighted to be working. This will be our 29th year with colleges and universities. But I think the one thing I would want to highlight is we actually at Mac, we traded sides of the microphone, and Mac was on our Higher Ed Jobs podcast talking about a number of things, but a lot about older job seekers. And it was immensely interesting. And if you're looking for that episode on Higher Ed Jobs, it's our podcast episode 71. It went live on February 3rd, 2025. And if you want to hear Mac from the other side of the microphone and hear his perspectives, it was really a great conversation. So I'd encourage the Mac fans out there to check that out.
Well, that's very kind of you, Andy. And thank you again for having me on your show. It was a pleasure to chat with you and your co-host. Now, to learn more about Andy and his work at Higher Ed Jobs, visit the Higher Ed Jobs website, higheredjobs.com. And Andy also encourages you to connect with him on LinkedIn. And when you do reach out to Andy on LinkedIn, please be sure to mention you heard him on Find Your Dream Job. Now, Andy, given all the great advice you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about how to walk away from the wrong job offer?
I think that it's pretty clear to me what the most important thing is, and that is This is your job search. And if you're trying to find your dream job and develop your dream career, make the choices that are right for you for the reasons you want. If you go to the effort of doing that, you have a much better chance of making the choices you want to make.
Next week, our guest will be Kathleen Davis. She's the deputy editor at fastcompany.com, where she writes about careers, hiring, and other workplace topics. Kathleen also hosts the New Way We Work podcast. You know the difference that connections can make when you apply for a job. But what do you do when you have no contacts inside an organization? Join us next Wednesday when Kathleen Davis and I talk about how to get your foot in the door when you don't know anyone. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job. This show is produced by Max List. Susan Thornton Hopp schedules our guests and writes our newsletter. Lisa Kislam-Barry Anderson manages our social media. Our sound engineer and editor is Matt Biorello. Dawn Mold creates our transcripts, and our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Mac Pritchard. See you next week. Have you ever been asked this in a job interview? Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with your boss. What would you say? This is what's called a behavioral interview question, and it's a common tactic. Employers use this kind of question to explore your fit for a job based on your past experience. It can be an easy question to answer if you have the right strategy. I show you how to answer these gotcha questions in our free Max List guide, 100 Behavioral Interview Questions You Need to Know. To get your copy, visit maxlist.org/questions. You'll also learn 4 simple steps for answering any behavioral interview question. Again, that's maxlist.org/questions. You can count on getting these questions in your next interview. Why not get the answers before you walk into the interview room? Go to maxlist.org/questions.